From a contract dispute to a bitter, long-standing back and forth about fair pay, here's the real reason Francis Ngannou left the UFC. Francis Ngannou is a Cameroonian-French mixed martial artist and former professional boxer who has dominated the heavyweight division in the UFC for some years. He's been described as one of the most feared fighters in MMA due to his knockout power, super impressive record, and his sheer brute strength and size. Standing at a towering 6 feet 4 inches and fighting at around 260 pounds. Ngannou began his career as a professional boxer in France before transitioning to mixed martial arts. He made his UFC debut in 2015 and quickly established himself as a top contender in the heavyweight division. Ngannou is known for his devastating knockout clout and holds notable victories over former UFC heavyweight champions Cain Velasquez and Junior Dos Santos. Ngannou's power has even earned him comparisons to the biggest boxing star on the planet, Mike Tyson. And Ngannou even feels confident enough to call himself the baddest man on the planet, as he feels he's taken the title from the legendary retired Tyson. Despite becoming such a formidable top fighter in the UFC, Ngannou decided to part ways with the biggest MMA organization in the world in December 2022, after growing tension with UFC president Dana White reached new heights. Despite climbing the ranks, gaining massive popularity, and working his way to becoming crowned the heavyweight champion, Ngannou left the UFC at the peak of his fame over a dispute regarding his contract. This left fight fans in total shock and had everyone wondering what his next move would be. With many options on the table, of course, there were heaps of other organizations interested in the UFC champion, so he had to bide his time well to leverage the perfect contract. And his plan definitely worked, as Ngannou landed a record-breaking deal with the PFL. Until the arrival of the Professional Fighters League, the UFC has been unmatched in terms of the caliber of its fights. And while the UFC is the biggest MMA organization in the world, the PFL is slowly catching up. The Professional Fighters League is a mixed martial arts organization that features a unique format of regular season, playoffs, and championship bouts. The PFL's regular season consists of a series of fights in which fighters earn points based on their performance. The top 8 fighters in each weight class advance to the playoffs, where they compete in a single elimination tournament. The winners of each weight class are crowned PFL champions and earn a $1 million prize. The PFL has attracted some of the top fighters in the world and has partnerships with major sports networks such as ESPN and NBC Sports. The PFL's unique format and impressive prize money have made it an exciting addition to the MMA landscape, and it's safe to assume that they were hot on Ngannou's tail as soon as he departed the UFC in December 2022. In May 2023, it was confirmed that former UFC heavyweight champion Ngannou signed an exclusive global MMA strategic partnership with the PFL. This well and truly confirmed that his differences with the UFC can never be worked out. And while this caused a lot of chitter-chatter in the MMA world, the more you look at it, it seems that Ngannou has made the right choice. Ngannou has expressed his love for boxing in the past. After all, it's where his roots lay. And while it is unsure what parts of his contract with the UFC he wasn't happy about, with his new contract with PFL, Ngannou has been granted permission to box outside of his MMA bouts. When speaking on the move with the New York Times, Ngannou commended his decision, saying, "I'm very excited about this deal with the PFL because they basically showed what I was expecting." He went on to say how the PFL saw value in him as a person and that they didn't just show up as a promotion that was looking for a fighter. So it seems he is throwing some shade at the UFC, an organization that's run by no-nonsense president Dana White. White is known for clashing with his fighters, and many other fighters have left in the past due to the contractual disputes. So perhaps White had a problem with Ngannou wanting to pursue boxing outside of MMA. White and Ngannou had been clashing for a few years before Ngannou decided to leave, with White claiming that Ngannou was becoming greedy and demanding more money, and if this is true, then he will be more than at home with the PFL. Some pros even called the deal the biggest in MMA history, and Ngannou stated himself that he would earn more than he ever did with the UFC. However, despite the massive hype around his signing, fight fans will have to wait a while before they see Ngannou step into the cage. The new partnership deal will not see Ngannou make his debut until mid-2024, but fans need not worry. Before then, he has his sights set on returning to boxing. And of course, fanatical fight fans are already speculating about who Ngannou will duke it out with. Heck, even Tyson Fury has weighed in on the matter, taking to his official Twitter account with a photoshopped poster of himself and Ngannou stood side by side. Fury captioned the playful post, "Who would like to see me fight this beast boxing rules at UFC gloves?" He even added Dana White into the post to invoke a response, but White snubbed the comedic tweet completely. However, many other notable people in the fighting world are super excited about Ngannou's new venture. After Ngannou shared a picture of him closing his deal with PFL on his official Twitter page on May 16, 2023, he captioned the tweet, "I'm not a businessman, I'm a business man." The post racked up over 4 million views and tons of stars weighed in with their thoughts. Fellow heavyweight fighter Ben Rothwell took to his official Twitter page to congratulate Ngannou on his signing, and controversial fight figure Jake Paul released a video sharing his excitement and captioned the tweet, "The baddest man in the planet has officially joined." Paul is also signed with the PFL, and Ngannou's entry has already unleashed the promoter within. After famed UFC heavyweight fighter John Bones Jones called Ngannou out on Twitter, a back and forth started, and of course, Paul had to chime in and shout his infamous motor mouth off. After the news broke of Ngannou's contract, Jones wrote a tweet saying, "Calling yourself the baddest man on the planet from across the street? Who does that? LOL." A feisty Ngannou replied within 30 minutes, simply saying, "Then cross the street." The businessman and Jake Paul saw an opportunity here. The problem child quickly took to his official page to pitch a PFL versus UFC event. Paul pitched a card that would be headlined with a bout between Francis Ngannou and John Jones, as well as clashes between other feuding fighters in the opposite organizations. He wrote, "Or let's have PFL and UFC work together and put on a massive event on ESPN." He then, of course, threw himself into the mix, saying, "And of course, Diaz versus Paul after I knock his ass out in boxing." As fun as this might sound, it's very unlikely to happen. John Jones is still signed with the UFC, and White has already shot down crossover events in the past. He is, in fact, dead against it, unless a fighter is coming over to his organization. He will also likely want to steer clear of Ngannou after their falling out. White has even stated that he would never rehire Ngannou in the future and sees his UFC days as completely over. So, it seems these two never really saw eye to eye and likely never will. While many UFC fighters have struggled to get along with Dana White, Ngannou seems to be one of the worst feuds for White. And this could very well be the resulting factor of Ngannou leaving White's famed octagon. So from a contract dispute to a bitter, long-standing back and forth about fair pay, this was the real reason Francis Ngannou left the UFC.